I don't know how many people are here. I think there's a lot of people here from Eindhoven. For those who don't know about Stripe S, it's an area near the centre of the city. It was originally a Philips site where the Nat Lab was. And it was actually an enclosed area. And a number of years ago, Philips moved to Amsterdam and they moved over to the high-tech campus. And this area has become free for development. So what have I got to do with this? At the time, I was actually working for Philips Design, and Eindhoven Council came to Philips Design and said, we're really interested in doing something different here with our lighting plan, with our public lighting. Can you help us? And so what we did is we actually looked into the development plans and we created a vision. But the nice thing about actually following Baz's story is that we didn't have users. We didn't have people. We actually had an area where buildings were being knocked down and turning into a development site. So what we had to do instead was look further afield, what was happening with technology, what was happening with signals and trends of what people are doing, and imagine what we thought the future would be. And what we did, this book actually, if anyone's interested, you can have a look at it. We created a book that was a vision. And the thing I really like about this now looking back is this vision still holds true to what we're doing now. So what we're implementing is really trying to realize this vision. And it's about an area that is in continuous development. So although people are now starting to live there this year, we've got businesses there, there are still buildings being developed. But also the idea is this area is going to be a test bed for experimentation. And actually the work that we're doing, we're calling it like living the lab. People that come and live, they're all kind of warned. When you come and live here, we would like you to participate in the development of this area. And it's still going to carry on developing way through to 2020, and I think even beyond that, if we're talking about systems that are going to be changed. The other thing we did is that, well, we're going to look at this not from the point of view of architecture and buildings, but we're going to look at the point of view from the people. What's the experience they're going to have in the future? What's the experience they want to have? And is there anything we can do to actually improve that? And also one of the underlying red threads of the strategy of Eindhoven's sustainability. And we had a little bit of a discussion about this. I said, well, sustainability, if you think about it from the sort of environmental point of view, means you want to turn all the lights out at 11 o'clock, or you use very low energy. And we actually were starting to think of things that were more dynamic. So we actually started looking at the idea of what we call more intelligent sustainability. So light where light is needed. If we can actually make the environment more comfortable, so people are actually more inclined to walk or take the bicycle, rather than drive the car. That actually is better than dimming the lights down to a lower level. So what I'm going to do is do a little bit of a leap past the ideas, because the exciting thing is that we're actually now building. But just to give an idea of the directions that we were following, and hopefully you can see that reflected in the projects that are being developed. So it's talking just about public lighting. Now, it's a mild frustration of mine that there's this strange distinction between public and private. So where the pavement ends and the building starts, there's no interaction. But what we're trying to do with a number of projects by talking to developers is saying, can we actually connect our systems? So when you've got your shops with really bright lights, can we now lower our street lights? So that's now in discussion, that we can actually sort of fuzzy the border between public and private. Also about dynamic reaction, we're looking about how people change their activities in the space. The interesting thing about Stripe is during the day, it's a creative development area. There's a lot of little offices, a lot of little companies there. But then sometimes, quite regularly in the summer on a Friday night, they have these all-night parties. So a completely different crowd of people come. Then you have the Glow Festival, you have Dutch Design Week, and then you get thousands of people. So how can we actually cater for that? People moving around. Also another aspect was looking at it from the point of view of branding. Is there something about the way people experience the space and how they feel about it that can actually help to develop their understanding of the brand of the space and the city Eindhoven, but also the branding of the community? So I said before, we didn't have people to ask. So we actually imagined the future. We created scenarios of our profiles of future people going around the space. And then from those scenarios, we developed different ideas, different concepts. And this work also won a couple of design awards, which we're very pleased about. But still, these were ideas. We wanted to make them. So the first idea was developed quite quickly, and I think also because it's one of the easiest to understand the slightly sort of less system-oriented, it was a pedestrian crossing. And the reason why this was necessary is because we also have the public transport going through Stripe S, and there's spaces where it shares the road with the pedestrians. And at the moment we have this quite loud dinging bell and the flashing lights, and we wanted to see if we could introduce another type of communication, but also make it a little bit more attractive. At the moment this is a standalone system, but I'll explain in the future how we're hoping to connect this up to the rest of the system at Stripe S. I think one interesting feature about this as well is installing it and then finding out what people do. When it was first installed, there were no pavements. I think at some places there were no even roads. There was really piles of mud and building site. The buses were going through and they were looking, going, well, there's no people, so they were driving through red. So actually there was a human factor in there that they were actually driving over the pedestrian crossing when it was green, which the newspapers found quite interesting. So after we did that project, we then developed a master plan, and this was really homing in a number of projects to be implemented. I'm not going to have time, unfortunately, to go through all of them, so I want to zoom in on just a couple of them. One of the most interesting ones is the street lighting. So after a number of rounds of tendering, the first one was actually to develop the concept. And a more creative bureau won that tender, and they actually developed a design for individually IP controllable RGB lighting. This means that the light can be any colour that you want it, can be controlled via the internet, and it can be dimmable. Most people, when they hear that, just think, why on earth would you want coloured street lighting? Immediately imagining what you think about with LED, bright red, bright green, bright blue, because you can, we do. The idea here is to actually use the colours to subtly change the white. So you can actually have cool or you can have warm colours. And then maybe very occasionally you can have a flash of colour going through that can maybe give some indication of movement. This system is going to be installed, so the first lamps have been developed, prototypes were tested, and it's now being developed into a marketable product. It's going to be installed this year. But the first stage of installment is not the end of the project. What are we actually going to do with this system? And what we need, and what we're also installing, is a sensor network, so that we can actually understand more about the environment, understand what people are doing, to actually then develop scenarios for what these streetlights will do. But we have no idea what the actual experience or result will be. But the beauty of this system is it's completely flexible. So ideas like when there's a bright moonlight, or when you have a sunrise or sunset, what should the street lighting do? Could it actually reflect or actually oppose that? When you have thousands of people coming out of the clock about, heading towards a residential area, can you dim the lights in one street and make them brighter in another? And will they be more inclined to go away from the most residential area and past the offices? So we're actually posing these questions, these will be programmed, and then we can test over time whether this works or not. But what we also want to do, I'm going to skip past this one, is we actually want to challenge the way that people think about light and how people experience it and how people interact with it. One of the ideas, the original ideas, was would it be possible for people to actually pick up the light and take it with them? So this is a project that's being developed by Dan Rosacard, and this is also going to be installed at Stripe S at the Nat Lab, which is being developed into a very interesting sort of media centre. What it is little crystals. When you put them on the ground, they light up. But when you have hundreds of them, what do people do with them? And this is also introducing the idea that people can touch and play, but also maybe even take away the light. I'm going to beat up. I'm going to squeeze through. When we first saw this development, and we thought, well, yeah, this is a bit of a problem with public space. People are going to take these things away. We're going to end up with nothing. Can we turn that around into a benefit? What if these crystals were actually identity element? What if we could actually put in some identity chip so that when people go away with them, they can actually then be connected and get more information and get more of a social connection? What if we could actually make the internal technology available to people in the local area that they can print their own designs and introduce their own designs so that we actually get people bringing them back instead of just taking them away? Some thoughts. And the last one, I'm going to finish on this. Thinking about the possibilities with LED, thinking about the possibilities with the network. Why does light have to be connected to a lamppost? Originally we wanted to get rid of all the lampposts. We wanted to have all the lights on wires, but that turned out to be impractical for certain reasons. So then we said, well, okay, let's get rid of the wires. Why don't the lights actually fly? And then you can start doing completely different things with the light. Then you can actually start controlling it yourself. What would people do with that? If the light can change colour, then you've got different types of experiences with the light. You can actually use them to help you find people. So I'm going to skip past this. One very, very quick because I'm going over time, which is very rude of me considering I was so sharp on everybody else. But I think you might like to see this. And also it's an indication of one of the pathways of this project is developing the ideas based on what we envision the future to be and then trying to find the technology to enable it. So actually this idea has been ticking around for a while because we couldn't find the technology that was really robust enough and affordable to do it. But this is Arts Electronica. They've been doing this, actually they do this for shows. So we've got in contact with them, but great, they've got the technology. But this is not robust enough to stay outside for months on end. We've actually now found a couple of companies who do have that technology. Also a company that has the technology that communicates to each other via an IP network. So there's now investigation to see, is it possible to set up a test bed where we can actually start looking at how these can work in the public space, what might you do with them, and what might people do with them. Because most of what we're doing here, especially in these more innovative projects, is asking the question, what if? I'm going to skip past the predictions because now it's time for you. So it's very warm in here, but what I would like everybody to do is to stand up. I'm going to ask Michelle and Gabby to pair up on this side of the room, and Baz on this side of the room. And then I would like the audience to pick up the chairs and move them around a bit. So, we'll move them around to have a bit more of a circular seating if people want to sit, maybe stand at the back.